You're watching ClearCut. Welcome back. I'm Michelle Makori. It looks like United Nations inspectors have discovered disturbing new evidence of Iran's nuclear weapons projects. The UN's International Atomic Energy Agency said today that it has detected uranium particles at an undeclared site in Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency appears to be confirming the same details included in the data that Israel presented to the United Nations last year. In a speech at the UN General Assembly, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke of a nuclear warehouse just outside of Tehran. And sources say that the UN inspectors took samples from that same warehouse. Here's more of what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say about the site in that 2018 UN speech, where he spoke of how the Iranians allegedly tried to hide the nuclear material.
Just last month, they removed 15 kilograms of radioactive material. You know what they did with it? They had 15 kilograms of radioactive material. They had to get it out of the site. So they took it out and they spread it around Tehran in an effort to hide the evidence. The endangered residents of Tehran may want to know that they can get a Geiger counter on Amazon for only $29.99.
All right, joining us now to talk about this and some other key developments out of Iran, our former U.S. Naval Intelligence Officer John Jordan and Gold Institute Senior Fellow Matt Brodsky. Good to have you both with us. So, Matt, turns out Netanyahu was correct. Iran did have an atomic warehouse that it was trying to conceal. So now that the UN has independently verified this, if these reports are accurate, what response do you expect?
Well, we've already heard from Europe that they're still committed to the nuclear agreement and think that that's the only way forward. So that's a very big problem. The thing is, we need to understand that what was discovered, what Israel discovered, just already shows how bad the nuclear agreement was to begin with, because John Kerry claimed in 2015 that we had absolute knowledge, those were his words, absolute knowledge of what Iran was up to with its nuclear program, and therefore we didn't need a baseline to verify all the previous dimensions of Iran's nuclear activity. But it's not just that, it's also the level of enrichment. The percentage now is well beyond the limit, up to 4.5%, above 3.6%. The amount, the stockpile that they still have of enriched uranium is nearly double that its amount. So these are all separate areas of cheating that the American people really need to be concentrating on, because it seems like it's just a blur of, oh, Iran cheating. Separate layers of cheating that Iran is doing, all of which contribute to a faster breakout time.
So, John, does this go to confirm just how bad that Iran nuclear deal was in the first place, that Iran was able to do this, get away with this kind of activity, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors weren't even aware about this until the Israelis had to point it out?
That's exactly it, and that's the fulcrum of the argument that the Europeans need to understand. If the 2015 deal was so great, how come the Iranians were breaking it? And more to the point, there's that undisclosed facility, not to mention what's been going on at Fordo. So the Iranians never intended to fully comply with the 2015 JCPOA at all. They were trying to work around the fringes, extract the benefits where they could economically, but give themselves every advantage, whether it's legitimately or illegitimately, in terms of pushing their fission program forward.
All right. So, Matt, as you say, the situation is getting more and more dangerous. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says that Iran is definitively moving towards nuclear breakout. I understand that diplomacy is the approach here, that the U.S. has the sanctions in place in order to try and get Tehran to the negotiating table. But if that doesn't happen fast enough and Iran continues to move towards a nuclear weapon, at what point does it become necessary for Israel or the U.S. or the two countries together to have to take some kind of military action?
Look, the U.S. is still pledged to diplomacy, of course. But there's other options that are available. First of all, they need to do away with waivers for specifically the Fordo reactor, which is something that was supposed to be used for a research site, which they're now enriching uranium at. That is breaking the deal. I don't know why recently the U.S. renewed those waivers. The fact is, with all the Democrat candidates pretty much pledging to get back into the nuclear agreement, it means, depending on what the situation looks like I'd say by next summer, if it looks like a Democrat could win the White House, that is a time when Israel is really going to have to think about a decision, because it's not clear to me that the Trump administration really wants to have or is even considered any form of military action right now. It hasn't responded to previous provocations, so.
And John, that is a criticism that many are leveling against the Trump administration, that it obviously doesn't seem to have any kind of appetite for military action. It's been very reluctant to enforce any kind of deterrence to the hostile acts that we've seen coming from Tehran. And that diplomacy, whilst a good idea, may just be taking too long to work. So has the Trump administration perhaps put itself in a bit of a corner here?
No, military action is always on the table. Keep in mind, the Trump administration is the first administration in a long time to deal seriously with Iran. The Obama administration punted by signing on to the JCPOA in the first place, incentivizing Iran
But John,
to an agreement.
do you see the president authorizing some kind of military action against Iran? Because it doesn't seem to be like he has the stomach or the will for it, at least at this point.
Well, it's a question of timing. Diplomatically, you need to get the Saudis on board. You need to get some of the other Arab countries on board, and there's internal political issues inside of those countries for those governments to actually come to the aid of Israel. So there's political considerations there. But a unilateral action by Israel and the United States, if done prematurely and before it's absolutely necessary, risks setting the entire region aflame. So we want to be very cautious about this. But yes, you're right. There is a point at which you have to make a choice. What you try to do is try to move the pieces of the chessboard together in such a way, looking at the entire Middle East picture, so that you can give yourself the best chance of success and minimize the risks to setting the region aflame and seeing the Arab street erupt against our friendly Arab governments.
Matt, are we any closer to getting Tehran back at the negotiating table? I mean, we have Iran's president now announcing that a new oil field with over 50 billion barrels worth of oil has recently been discovered, as though that is intended to signal that their economic situation is about to be bolstered. What's it going to take to get the regime to come to the negotiating table?
Right. The present course we're on is not going to get them to the table. That's the problem. There is a maximum amount of pressure we can have economically, but that's not what we're doing. We've kept the waivers in place that I discussed. And again, with the oil find, this is something they know they can rely on Turkey and other friends that will end up trading with oil, and they'll end up getting gold like they did last time previously with Turkey. This is the scam. So they're going to find a way around sanctions. We need the maximum amount of pressure right now, and that requires the Trump administration to realize that the game they're playing with Iran, which is all about convincing Europe isn't going to come along. We just heard their comments about what the IAEA said. They're like the three little pigs talking about how strong the straw house is after the wolf blew it down.
That's a good analogy, and we'll wrap it up on that metaphor. Thank you so much, Matt Brodsky, John Jordan. Appreciate your analysis. Focusing on Hong Kong now.